Hello everyone, I'm Coretta Wilson. Welcome to Insight with Superintendent Clayton Wilcox, the show that keeps you up to date on the issues and initiatives in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. Recent events across the nation and here at home have parents and the community seeking answers about the safety of our schools and the support provided to our students. So we plan to answer those questions and get some insight from the CMS Superintendent, Dr. Clayton Wilcox. Dr. Wilcox, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
We have a lot to talk about in this edition of Insight, so we're going to get right to it. We've got breaking the link, but of course we've got school safety to start with. The tragic events that happened in Florida recently, we all saw those events unfold live on television. What was your reaction to those events?
I was shocked. I was horrified. Superintendent Ronci is a friend, and so to watch him try to explain to his community what had happened there, but also just knowing that what these families were going through, this horrific waiting to know, and then the ultimate outcome just makes you sick.
Mm-hmm. And of course, as we watch those events, our students, our staff, our community asks, can it happen here? What are the steps that we're putting in place to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep our Team CMS safe?
Well, we're doing an awful lot of things. Some things that we'll talk about today, other things that we ought not.
Right.
But I think, the direct answer to the question is we can't know where evil might pop up. Mm-hmm. We do our very best to try to identify people who we believe are problems, who are perhaps living on the edge, and we try to get them the counseling support they need, but all too often those folks don't accept that help or that support. So, we're looking at how do we harden our facilities, and those are things I never thought I'd say as a school superintendent. How do we improve the security of our buildings? Is it steel doors? Is it reducing windows? Is it adding a security vestibule? Is it monitoring social media? And I think the answer to all of it is yes, it is. Is it new fencing? Yes, I think it is. Is it more security on our campuses? Yes, I think that it is. And we're looking at all those things. We're hopeful that the county commissioners will see our need for enhanced safety and security and help to fund that. Mm-hmm. I've been working with Chief Putney and others to talk about how we can increase the presence of police officers. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, both Chief Putney and I, agree that we have to keep these people from the schools, not react to them being in the schools.
And now you mentioned a lot of things, and most of our schools were built decades ago. These are open campuses, open schools. Some campuses are a little more closed than others, but oftentimes students will change classes where they have to go outside to inside. We have recess outside. We have PE outside. Mm-hmm. How do we keep our students safe when they are not in the building?
Well, the crazy thing is that you just can't. You try. You make sure that the teachers are hyper vigilant about who's around. You make sure that you have great secure in place lockdown procedures. Mm-hmm. You make sure that to the extent that it's possible your campuses are fenced, and we're going to be looking at that. Mm-hmm. But again, a fence isn't going to keep an armed intruder from shooting into the campus as kids pass. A fence really is only as good as the person is at scaling the fence. So we just have a lot of things that we have to think about. We've talked to our principals about locking exterior doors except for the passing times, and then maybe having a teacher who's there to let kids in, make sure that they recognize kids. In the pre-conversation we were talking about, you were using a security card to get into your buildings from time to time. So we're looking at all those things. The unfortunate thing for us is we have 177 campuses, and each campus is unique, so there's going to be some unique solutions.
What about any new schools being built? Will you consider how to build new schools so that they are safer?
Absolutely. I think that, we'll look at a couple things. One, we won't build this Florida-style school anymore with multiple buildings. It will be one building where we really have a secure perimeter, if you will. As we move forward, this idea of portable classrooms, I think it gives new reason to say, we've got to build a school for anticipated needs, mm-hmm. not build a school and say, well, we'll put 7 portables on that campus in case, so I think we're going to think differently about that. But I think we're also going to look at, what kind of doors are we putting in? What kind of access points do we have? A lot of things are going to change, not just here in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, but across this country in terms of school construction.
Again, reiterate some of the changes that have already been made at some of the schools with the key cards, because some schools have been able to make some immediate changes that can maybe make the community feel a little bit safer? What are some of the immediate changes that have been going on?
Well, we're taking a look, for example, at the Raptor technologies, the technology that people use to sign into a building.
Okay.
I know that goes by different names in different schools, but basically we want to make sure that people who come in are people who don't pose a threat. We're making sure that we're escorting guests in the building, particularly when we don't know them well. We're taking a look at a number of new technologies that we can perhaps view some social media of people ahead of time. We're stepped up our presence of our police officers. We've given an invitation to all of our local police officers to stop in and have breakfast or lunch in our schools. I know the sheriff's department is actually stopping school when they do their kind of paperwork where they're caught in a car. They're actually parking in a school parking lot to give us an extra presence and be in closer proximity in case there was a bad guy there.
Being vigilant. What is off the table? There's been a lot of talk about teachers having firearms or volunteers covering the perimeter. What's off the table as far as Team CMS is concerned?
Well, I think you've named the one thing that really is off the table for me as a superintendent, I think for the majority of our board members, and that's arming our teachers. We ask our teachers to do so much already, and the fact is our teachers aren't trained to do this. It's really not in many teachers' dispositions to shoot at somebody, even if somebody's coming at their children. It's just, teachers are by nature are helpers. They are people who are, gatherers. They're just not somebody who's going to step into that fray easily. Yet, I think there probably isn't a teacher who wouldn't lay down their life to save their children. But to put them in harm's way with a pistol in their hand or some other weapon, I just think is wrong-headed. We don't have the training for it. I would also say this, that, if guns are a problem, adding more guns to the problem doesn't seem to be a smart, intelligent solution. Now, please understand, I'm not here to say that I don't believe in the Second Amendment. This is not about that for me. What this is about is, what teachers are trained to do versus what others are trained to do. I believe that law enforcement is trained to do this. We have to leave this in their hands.
We know we have resource officers at our schools as well. Would you try to increase the number of resource officers and explain perhaps to our viewers what the role is of the resource officer as well?
Well, first of all, we have contracts with most of the municipalities to provide resource officers. So we have 60 to 70 resource officers that are in our school every day that school's in. In addition to that, we have almost 100 unarmed security team members here with us, the security associates. And then we have the sheriff's office in close proximity, and we have some other layers. We have our own CMS PD, where we have 14 sworn officers, a number of detectives, and the chief, all law enforcement officers who worked in CMPD or another local agency. So we have a really strong security presence. They're first and foremost to provide security, but secondly, they're to really help our kids understand that police officers are human just like everybody else, that they can develop great relationships that carry over into the community. They can lend a hand around any kind of support issue for us. So they have a multifaceted role, but first and foremost, they're peacekeepers.
Yeah. What are the students saying? Because the students in Florida have been very outspoken. Have any of the students here in Charlotte made any impactful statements that you've heard of?
Well, I think I've heard a lot of impactful statements. We've also had a number of students who have participated in kind of organized walkouts. They've talked with their principals and said, we are going to honor these young people who lost their lives in Florida. We're going to stand with other students across this country. I know on March 14th, a number of our kids are planning to step out of their schools. They're working with their principals right now to make sure this is a responsible protest that is not only responsible, but it also is very visible. And so, I've been asked by a number of schools to step with them. I'm not sure that I'm comfortable doing that, but I would say I think our student voice is important. So I think we're seeing a lot. The one thing I do want to say, because at about the same time as this Florida shooting, a report was released that showed that we had more guns on our campuses last year than we'd had in the previous 8 or 10 years. We had 19 guns. But I think what was lost in that story are two things. First, that most of the guns that were captured on our campuses were captured because kids said something. So this idea of if you see something, say something is resonating with young people. The second thing that I would say is there was not a shot fired on our campuses. So those guns, yes, they were lethal, yes, they were deadly, but there were no shots fired because kids and teachers were vigilant and they paid attention to circumstance.
I want to go back a little bit to what you talked about with more counselors being in the schools, because we do have more counselors in the schools. Let's talk about mental health problems that some of our students may be having: depression, feeling suicidal. How important is it for our teachers and our staff and even some of our students to recognize when a peer is in trouble?
I think it's vitally important that people not only recognize it, but then they say something to a responsible adult so that we can get these young people the help. Now, some young people refuse the help, and that's terrible, but it's a reality that we live in. But, we're looking to add more counselors and social workers to the mix, and the county commissioners have so far sent some pretty strong signals that they agree with us and that they will add to the number of counselors and social workers and psychologists that we have. Today, the unfortunate reality is that, society is less forgiving than it ever was. I think there are a lot of people that are hurting badly. A lot of people spiral into kind of an abyss that they just can't come out of, and so they honestly, I think, lose the ability to be really responsible for their actions because they're just in a bad place. So we have to be vigilant about that. This goes back to, too, we see all too often bullying in our schools, and people say, well, that's just kids being kids. It's not kids being kids anymore. We've got to be much more thoughtful when we see kids picking on other kids to say, you know what, stop, that's not right, that's not who we are. And so I think we've got a lot of things at play here.
And I'm going to give you the last word on this as well. When parents, pull up and they drop their children off to school, kiss them and say goodbye, they expect to pick them back up from the bus stop or in the carpool. What can you say to make those parents feel comfortable?
Yeah, for many parents, I think the only thing that I can say is that we take security as job number one. It is the most important thing to us. Making sure that their children are under our care and are well taken care of. Now, I know that from time to time something happens on one of our campuses where parents question that. But I can tell you that my principal team, my teacher team, the support team members, they all care deeply about these kids and they feel privileged to be there. So I would say to the parents who are dropping off their kids and giving them a kiss goodbye, thank you. You should always say, I love you, because it's a supportive moment. But I would also tell you, rest assured that the adults on that campus would lay down their lives for those children.